The feeders? John was visiting his friend Alex and his family in their new home in the countryside. They were taking a tour of the house and Alex invited John to the attic to show him some family antiques. As John climbed the stairs, he saw an old woman sitting in a rocking chair in the corner. He assumed she was Alex's elderly mother who lived with them, but to his surprise, Alex told him that his mother did not live with them and no one else was in the house. John asked the old woman who she was, but she remained silent, just staring straight ahead. John felt a chill run down his spine and couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He tried to bring it up with Alex, but his friend shrugged it off, saying it was just his imagination. However, John couldn't shake the feeling and decided to leave early the next morning. On his way home, he couldn't help but feel like he was being watched. After a restless night, John returned home, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. He had heard strange noises and felt an eerie presence throughout the night, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what was causing it. Despite this, he tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. As he settled into bed, he heard a creak from the floorboards in his room. The sound was soft at first, but it quickly grew louder, causing John to sit up in bed. The creaking was coming from the corner of the room, where the old rocking chair was. He could see it moving as if someone was sitting in it. John rubbed his eyes and looked again, but the chair was still. He shook his head and lay back down, trying to relax. Suddenly, he felt the old woman from the attic sliding up against him in his bed. She was inches away from him, and he could feel her breath on his skin. The woman drew John close to her and began kissing his skin. John was paralyzed with fear. He could feel her cold, bony fingers touching his cheek. He tried to pull away, but he found that he couldn't. His body was no longer his own, and he was powerless to escape her grasp. The woman took John each night for weeks, draining him of his life force. He became weak and tired, barely able to get out of bed. He lost his job and became isolated from his friends and family. He was consumed by the fear and desire that the woman brought into his life. One night, John awoke in a cold sweat, feeling like he was being suffocated. He looked up and saw the woman, now looking even younger, feeding on him. He was horrified, and he knew that he had to escape. He gathered all his strength and used it to push her away. He stumbled out of bed and ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge. He was trapped in his room with the woman. John's fear turned to desperation as he realized that he was going to die. He was exhausted and weak, with no escape in sight. But then, he remembered the old abandoned house in the countryside where he first encountered the old woman. He had a gut feeling that this was where he would find the answer to his troubles. With renewed strength, John made his way to the abandoned house. He entered the attic, where he found the old woman waiting for him. He stood face to face with the entity, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman was now a young, beautiful woman with a baby in her arms. John realized that the baby was the source of his torment, and he had to destroy it. John had enough. He couldn't keep living in fear of the old woman's visits every night. He sought help from a local priest, who provided him with a protection charm and advised him to pray every night before bed. For the next several nights, John did just that, and to his relief, the old woman didn't appear. He started to believe that he had broken free from her grip and was finally able to get some peace of mind. But that all changed on a fateful night. John was fast asleep in his bed, exhausted from a long day's work. As he was about to drift into a deep slumber, he was suddenly awoken by the sound of creaking floorboards. He opened his eyes to find the old woman and a young child sitting at the foot of his bed. The woman was looking at him with her cold, empty eyes, and the child was giggling and clapping its hands. John tried to move, but he was paralyzed with fear. He couldn't even utter a scream. The woman moved closer to him, and the child crawled into bed next to him. They started to touch and kiss his skin, and he felt his energy draining away. As the woman and the child consumed him, John's thoughts were filled with fear and terror. He thought about all the missed opportunities in his life, and all the people he would never see again. He felt his life slipping away, and he was powerless to stop it. The woman and the child were devouring him completely, leaving no trace of his existence behind. John's screams echoed through the empty house as his body was consumed. The next morning, when his neighbors went to check on him, they found nothing but an empty bed and a lingering feeling of fear in the air. The old woman and the child were never seen again, but the memory of John's horrifying end lived on, forever haunting the small town where he lived.